Mitchell Stankovic Associates and the Underground Ideas into Action presents The Underground Chats, authentic conversations with credit union thought leaders. Today's chat, Data-Driven Personalization with Jeff LoCastro, founder and CEO at Neener Analytics.
How are you, Jeff? How's your family? How's the company? What's going on?
Everything's good. 2020 was weird. I don't. Weird isn't the thesaurus word, right? It isn't the 4-year degree word, but it's perfect. It was just weird in every way. I've never had a year where I was so glad for it to be over. You know, where New Year's Eve wasn't filled with a bit of melancholy. No, it was like, let's just get the 1201. Let's just get on the other side of this nightmare, this craziness, and just move on. So it was good. It allowed us to do some, we had some of our customers, lenders, banks, that just stopped lending. We're doing 10, 15,000 applications a month or more, and suddenly they're doing 30. Yeah. And we had some online lenders that were global that just evaporated. They couldn't weather it. We were fine, and it actually did. Looking for the silver lining, it did allow us to do some things that we just didn't have time for. So we implemented WhatsApp and some other app processes. Some really cool point of sale stuff. So it allowed us to do some really cool stuff and deepen our relationships with our social media partners. Look, I wouldn't wish 2020 so that we could do that, but 2020 was what it was, and we took advantage of it. We're actually in a better place as a result.
It's a really interesting point, because we all went through, I think, first of all, the just shock of it, then the worry, and then the survival, and then what do we do to keep things going? So we made those shifts, and then we looked to the future and said, okay, it's allowed us to look, like in our case, Undergrounds were in person, now we're virtual, now thousands of people are able to watch. So, it really expanded the audience. I think the key thing for me, as I look back on it, is that the pain of all of the stuff that happened is still there. People are still going through this feeling of being at home. We're still looking at our business and saying, how do we maneuver? And I'm ready to move on. I don't know about you, but I was like, I'm ready to move on, but obviously things keep happening. So
that was the thing that felt good. Well, we couldn't wait to get into 2021, is because in November, December, it was palpable with our customers that they were ready to get going again, that they understood, look, virus, right? Viruses come and go. We've had them since the beginning of time, but they realized that the economic shutdown was man-made. Humans made decisions to say, let's just stop. It wasn't a cycle that you simply can't, maybe you can plan for, but you don't understand it. You just have to weather it. They understood it was today we're in business, tomorrow we got to do. So November, December, it was palpable that they were ready to start ramping up again, to get back to flip the switch. And they're flipping the switch now. And we're starting to see stuff going back up. They're getting comfortable with the volume. They're getting comfortable with what they're seeing. I was thinking about this morning, the plus, I hate saying plus, but the plus side of it was something that everybody on the planet had to do, right? Now, some people lost their jobs, lost their income, lost their food, lost their housing, lost significantly more than I'm not even trying to compare myself to that. I didn't have that kind of worry. I suspect you didn't either. But there were those that really, it was like, oh my gosh, one day I'm living in my 2-bedroom apartment, 3-bedroom apartment. The next day I'm sleeping on someone's couch, right? So it was but everybody on the planet had a degree of pain. And from a business perspective, the opposite of a business cycle where some people are more affected, every business felt it. And my cohort, my fellow founders in Fintech, talking with them after the new year, they did the same thing. It was just like they saw things just drop. They regrouped. They figured out, okay, we can do some stuff now that we didn't have time for. So we all did this kind of the same thing and have come out of it, I think better. But
Yeah,
I can't wait to get rid of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that getting on the other side of our attitudes, if you will, or our business initiatives, I think will continue throughout. I'm looking at 2021 as a year of transition in so many ways. We're going to transition to new business models. We're going to be disrupted in different ways. But I think the commonality of the disruption made us all maybe value what we have more. Like even when you were making the comments about the divide that's happening, I think all of us are valuing it in a different way. And hopefully out of that comes some gratitude. Now, I know that one of the things that you keep an eye on is the fintech world. And I showed an article with you that I think you'd seen as well. But the whole idea is that people are scared shitless about fintechs and some of the big banks. And I'm going to say that intentionally because the article caught my attention for that reason.
Yeah, right.
You know, so what do you think this did? I mean, not only did we have to go virtual, but I think people got used to a more seamless environment, in some cases with Amazon, going online with our basic needs. All of that became very much about, I don't want to have to do this if it's clumsy. So
right,
I think
absolutely.
So tell me about how that's going to affect our consumer attitudes and purchasing and, you know, the way you look at the world through fintechs.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting is it showed an entirely different population channel that someone is out there to deliver food to your door, right? Deliver groceries to your door. The 65-year-old retired couple who may have a smartphone, but really used it for, didn't photograph anything, but they just used it as a telephone. Now found that they could actually use it to get things that they need. They found that they could actually use their device to have a doctor's appointment, right? All of these things. Now, the flip side to that is the one side to that is it kept people in their home, and they could still live and conduct business. The flip side to that is that they stayed at home. It's still right. So it's the transition idea for 2021. There's going to be an equilibrium found, and I'm not sure where that's going to land between those that discovered this new digital mobility versus finding that balance and say, okay, where do I, now that I'm going to be getting out and engaging with the world and engaging with other human beings, where does that balance come?
So before you go on, I want to interject because I think that your point is so important. When you talked about this generation, if you will, that now has discovered, if we go to the other side, when you talked about equilibrium, I love that because we now go to the whatever we call the next generation in today's environment. But let's talk about our school, the changes that happened with school, where everything went virtual for them as well. So we have kids from, kindergarten through high school, college, that are now using their devices, and they're sustainable in the way that they do it. And I know that that's going to be just as much of a discovery. So I just wanted to comment on that and see. So when you look at it, it's total population, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a global discovery, right? And that's not getting back to what we were talking about earlier, about that everyone was affected. which is an interesting concept because, 18 months ago, no one could have predicted. No one would have said, everyone on the planet, we're just going to stop, right? And everyone's going to have to find a way to migrate. Who could have said that? Anyone would have said that. You would have said that's nonsense. That's impossible to do. But it did force everyone to migrate to some kind of a digital world. Anecdotally, I know those people that have had to do that. I've expanded my digital footprint. I live in a digital world. My business is a digital business, but I've expanded that and have made those discoveries on my own, and as well as others. So it's to your point about education. There are some students that are struggling with that because they learn differently. They need a human being talking to them. But what they've also found on the flip side is, you mean I can go back to the lecture because it's on video and I can watch it again and watch the lecture multiple times. So they're having to figure out how to sort of relearn learning. And my son is going through this. He's a freshman at the University of Kansas, and he's having to do that very same thing. He sort of figure out how to navigate this as they begin to transition, and keeping some form of live education and some sort of virtual education. And where do those two meet in the middle? It's anyone's guess. Some kind of hybrid, but what does that hybrid look like? It would be guessing at this point.
So it is. So your business is, I was thinking of it as kind of human science. It's the idea of understanding your consumer behavior. And you were talking about the fact that we shut down, so we also didn't spend money. So as much, or we were saving it, or we're, applying it. So that human psyche, and how does that relate to Neener Analytics, and how do you look at that information going forward?
Yeah, let's define human data science first. The human data science is the concept that we pioneered. Human data science is the idea of using data owned, controlled, and created by the human individual. That is what really tells the story, right? Data that's not subject to any protected group status, nor data that anyone has the franchise on, nor is disenfranchised from. Data that every human being on the planet possesses, just in different ratios. So data that by its nature is immune to disparate impact. Obviously, that doesn't include historical, transactional, or relational approaches, which is really big data solutions. So the idea here is to build a foundation. The idea here is my grandfather back in 1940, when he bought his first house, he walked into the bank and the banker said, "I know you. I know you." And that's what he meant. I know you. Hey, I know you. My other grandfather, for example, who didn't live in the same city or state, if he were to walk into that same bank, the banker would say, "Oh, I don't know you, but I know people like you." Ouch. What a horrible way to make a decision about someone. But that's what everyone's been doing. So the idea of human data science is to use these types of inputs. And those inputs for that first grandfather, that banker that said, "I know you," were the conversations and communications that he had with him over time, right? Not understanding him based on what he talked about, but rather how he talked about things, which is exactly how human beings make decisions about other human beings, make good decisions about other human beings. Not that he was a White Sox, he lived in Chicago, not that he was a White Sox fan or a Cubs fan. That's big data aggregations. As soon as you do that, you throw somebody into a bin. And those bins sometimes get really ugly. My second grandfather was an Italian immigrant. So when someone says to him, "I don't know you, but I know people like you," ouch, what does that mean? In 1940, right? I think we all know what that means, right? Someone's throwing him into a bin that probably doesn't have good outcomes. But the "I know you." So how did what we went through affect the beauty of these psychological conditions and domains that every human being possesses at their core are relatively stable. Now, there can be arcs and changes, right? As people get older, they tend to get, it's not a guarantee, but they tend to get more conscientious. Not always. Conscientious might increase, but other domains and conditions might decrease, right? Younger people tend to be less conscientious, not always, but tend to be less conscientious because they're moving in different directions. And other conditions and domains might be higher. So there's an ebb and flow, but those ebbs and flows tend to happen over protracted periods of time. So we're not really seeing in our modeling in these last I want to say 11 months, much change in the arc, our decisioning arc. The models haven't fundamentally changed because these conditions and domains based on human data science and small data haven't changed that much. How people respond to different things is what's interesting, right? But that core is doesn't change much. So it's so cracking that, at least for us, right? Cracking that code was a pretty powerful thing, and putting everyone on an equal footing as an individual, not based on a group or a dynamic or a big data aggregation.
So that's when I look to the future, I think the customization, the personalization, the fact that I want people to know me is something that I think will become even greater because we feel isolated. We feel less connected. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, we there's many ways to position what I just talked about, but in the end, this is personalization, right? A lot of banks, credit unions, lenders talk about a more personalized experience while they throw people into bins and aggregations and make decisions about them. What a disconnect that is, right? Personalization is not someone, as you walk into the bank, they say, "Hey, how you doing?" and hand you a bottle of water, right? Personalization is saying, "I know you. I know you. I know you." And back in 1940, that was the ultimate personalization relationship. I know you, right? So absolutely. When we talk about small data and human data science, that's exactly what we're talking about, is a personal engagement with whatever organization is trying to understand who you are. And the interesting thing here is that the Gen Y and the Gen Z have an expectation that before you even begin the encounter, that you're going to know who they are.
100%. And I look at the mission, as you know, very involved with credit unions, and the social purpose of a credit union is all about I know you. And
Absolutely.
Think about why they were founded and the mission.
Absolutely.
So that's fascinating. So when you take a look at what you've learned, over your career, obviously, and what you're seeing with Fintechs, what do you think the biggest are a couple of Tom Peters, blinding flash to the obvious, BFOs might be that people need to seriously say, hey, we need to look at this and we need to be serious about our response?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I'm not sure that this is a BFO, but it should be. Fintechs, it's a swarm. It's a swarm. They have billions of dollars cumulatively. That's not an exaggeration. Billions of dollars. They have more than enough money to destroy you. They say a credit union. They have more than enough money to destroy you. And I don't mean by destroy, eat into your market share, right? Disruption is a code word for destroy. These Fintechs are aggressive. They're passionate. They're well-funded. They make faster decisions. They aren't afraid to make mistakes. In fact, they're encouraged to do so by their investors. They offer products and services that consumers want. How do we know that they offer products and services that consumers want? Because they're constantly testing and measuring, and they're working 18-hour days. That's a formidable enemy. And what I see is two camps. One that has no idea that that's what the world is. No idea, because they're too busy going to conferences with other people like them, going to breakout sessions given by people that are going to the conference like them. I've been to those. I've seen them. It's frightening. The disconnect that I see there, and the others that give lip service to it because they're too afraid to say, this is a formidable enemy. What do we do? So they pretend like it doesn't happen, that it's not out there, but it's there. I think that's the BFO because you've got to acknowledge that it's out there. and I think we've had this conversation before. The building that I'm in right now, where I'm sitting right now, where we have our headquarters, at any given time, okay, pre-COVID, not today, but at any given time, there's 400 startups in this building, 400 here in Silicon Valley in Sunnyvale. The second floor where I am right now, at any given time, there's 100 to 150 Fintech startups in this one building on this one floor. And this is one building among thousands in this valley. It's a real thing. And this is just one area. This is happening all over the country, all over the globe. This is a real thing. And I've invited, for example, credit unions. I've invited credit unions to come here. You need to see what's happening. And I will point to them. I will point to all the ones that are trying to disrupt you, which is code for destroy you. You need to see it. It's a real thing. If you're afraid to acknowledge it, I'll put it in your face, because it is a real. So that's the blinding flash of the obvious. I think that you have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge exactly what I just said before you can even take that next step. And that's the next question: is what does that next step look like?
Yeah, and I want to. That's interesting. Because I think that people are acknowledging it, and from the standpoint of, hey, it's out there. The question's going to be, where do we choose to partner, and where do we choose to use that talent? And I see organizations looking at different credit union service organizations, different QSOs, partnering with Fintechs. Do you see that happening, or does it have to go deeper than that? Do people have to really understand the psyche of a fintech?
Yeah, well, there's an entire book there. Credit unions, as other corporates do, have to understand how to work with a fintech. That is always a struggle, whether you're fully committed to it or not. They have to understand how to do it, because it is different than working with a large established multinational vendor. It is different. They move at different. We move at different paces. So that's one component, and that could be a completely separate conversation at one time, for another time. The biggest thing that I see in the encounters that I have with credit unions is they're so afraid to make a mistake. They're so afraid to make a mistake. And that's a gigantic mistake. Credit unions, and I say none of this with joy, with glee, or with pleasure, because credit unions are a perfect fit for technologies like ours, right? The personalization of the relationship, the personalization of the decisioning. We're a perfect fit. We're a major disruptor. We're also a provider to companies like credit unions. And we would love to have lots of credit unions climb on board. But right now, from my perspective, credit unions are the Blockbuster video. And what I mean by that is when Blockbuster went out of business, Blockbuster worked, right? They had buildings, they had parking. People drove up, parked their car, walked in, looked through the library, pulled the videos off that and brought it to the desk, and they scanned it and they walked out. It worked. But the disruptors came in and said, we need to move into DVDs, right? A digitized version of this with all the benefits that come from that. And we need to send this, we need to send these through the mail, which was the precursor to having it live streaming. Blockbuster was so slow to move because they were so afraid of making that mistake. What if this is the wrong choice? What if it? And it was they did it to their. I mean, they were closing fully functioning operations. And that's what I see. And there's that fear of making that mistake. So what I say when I'm sitting down with a credit union, I say, look, test it, try it, whether it's us, whether it's someone else, test it, try it, make a mistake, you'll find out what the right answer is. Now with us, it will work and it won't be a mistake, but test it, try it. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. And that's the biggest roadblock, right? The old adage, and you've heard it, I'm sure 1,000 times, nobody ever got fired by hiring IBM, right? Well, also no one ever progressed, grew, owned markets by hiring IBM. Not casting dispersions on IBM, but I think we all know what we're talking about here. So that's the biggest problem that I see, is that this fear of making a mistake, and it's the
well, there's no better time. I think it's there's a wake-up call. It happened to all of us, as you mentioned, in 2020.
I hope so. Yeah.
And, the question really will come down to how do we respond and how do we transition, and will it be going back? And if so, what does that mean? So your comment about credit unions and blockbuster is fascinating. I love to pursue it. So I'm going to wrap up by saying to you, I believe strongly that the direction of your organization is paramount to the future of financial services. And so I'm looking at banks, I'm looking at, mortgage companies, as you mentioned earlier, credit unions. The reality is that we can no longer be transaction driven. And we can't just be, customer management systems, databases, as you said, that have the buckets. I think the personalized approach to understanding and knowing who I am, because my tolerance level, as well as other generations, our tolerance level is less. We have so much going on. We need to have a seamless experience. We don't need any type of roadblocks. So I'm excited to see where you go, and I'm excited to explore that information. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, where do we reach out?
Well, NeenerAnalytics.com, you can always start there. You can click there and we can schedule a free demo. You can always reach me at jeff@neener.net. And I'm also 18 hours a day.
Yes. Many of us at all, and the reality is, in today's world, we're all kind of busy. Well, listen, we'll stay in touch. I'm looking forward to, learning more and sharing the story with people. Okay?
Excellent. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.